How did it go last lesson? Were you able to get that feed of JSON feed of your data? And don't worry about it. We're going to be working through this and I'm going to show you can pull out the data that's contained within all of this JSON information. So first of all, let's hook up our jQuery library. So that's going to be the way that we're going to be making our AJAX calls. So we can go over to the hosted libraries, Google's hosted libraries, and I'm going to just simply bring the CDN in. So there's a number of ways to bring jQuery obviously into your project. So you can select whichever one works best for you. In this case, I find that CDNs are usually the easiest. So I'm going to simply bring jQuery into my project within that type of format. And I've got my web page open over here. And next, we're going to attempt to pull some of that information into our web application. And we're going to use jQuery. So it's going to be relatively easy to do. So let's set up our jQuery wrapper. So first we're going to make sure that the DOM is ready. So this is a shorthand format for the document ready function in jQuery. So we make sure that the DOM is loaded and ready to use. And next what we're going to do is we're going to set up a button over here. And then what this button is going to do is once it gets clicked, it's going to trigger that we're going to make our AJAX call and pick up our JSON data, and then we're going to loop through it and output it within our web page. So we give it an ID and we'll just simply call it load data and load JSON. So one more field we should create. So give it an ID of output. And within here is where we can output our data that we're pulling back. So we're all ready to begin. So next, let's set up an event listener. And we're setting up an event listener for the button with the ID of load data. And simple click event that we're going to be listening for. So create our function in there. And so once the button is clicked, then we want to do something. And what we want to do is let's do get JSON. So this is shorthand method. It's probably the easiest one to work with AJAX. And so we need some parameters. So we need a URL. And then we need to do something once we make our connection. So we're going to retrieve back that data. And for now, let's just console log out that data. And then we'll do something with it afterwards. So next, let's add in our URL. So set up a variable called URL. And that's where we need to go over and grab our URL. So again, this is that spreadsheet. So the URL is going to be always the same for every spreadsheet. The only thing that's going to be different is going to be this ID number. So this big, huge number here, this is going to, or set of characters is going to be different depending on what your ID is, which sheet you're using. And you could also switch between sheets really easily because all you have to do is just update this information. So there we go. So we've got our URL, we've got our data, we've got our click event. So everything looks like it's ready to go. Let's try it out within our application. So make this bigger, refresh, load, and we'll see what happens. So there we go. So we got all of that information, as easy as that, into our application. So next step is to go through this information. So it's already JSON formatted. When you use get JSON, jQuery will automatically format into a JSON format, and it does that automatically anyway. If it detects that the meme type is a JSON format, it'll actually try to convert it into a JSON usable. So even though it's coming in as a string value, it'll convert it into a JSON usable format. So let's take a quick look through what types of data we have here. So we've got our links, so we've got where the link is, we've got an ID, we've got categories, we've got a bunch of information here. So we've got a title, so whatever the sheet title is. So we've got our sheet 1 text. We've got a bunch of results that came in as well. And we see that we've got an array here of entries. So this is where we're going to be looking at because this is where all of our content is going to be listed. So we see that we've got an array and we've got 2 items in the array. And we see that company first, group last. So it's actually matching with what we had within our Google Sheet. So if we open that up on the other side, and we can do a quick comparison here, and we see that it is actually matching in what the values are. So by default, what it's doing is it's actually taking the entries and it's starting at the second one because it's assuming that these are all headings. So it's starting at the second one. So it sees that there's 2 entries there. And that's what we see there being output. There's also up on top, there's categories. So there's a bunch of additional information, but we don't really need to make use of that. What we do need to make use of are the entries because that's the ones that we want to loop through and ultimately output on our page. So that's coming up in the next lesson. So go ahead and try this out for yourself and open up your editor and bring in that Google Sheet data, and then you're going to be ready to output it within your web page. So that's all coming up in the next lesson.